I'm filming.
Oh, you are?
Yep. Hello.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Connected Universe. I did a presentation like this last year, kind of just as a for fun thing. I never had plans to do it again, and then I really enjoyed it. And I said, hey, maybe next year I will also try connecting every single play on campus. So here we are. Your Connected Universe, or as I like to call it, fast food, wet Hamlet, stand, and stranger bill signs like Andy's Earth answer, but variations on subproject K-Market, and fun booth night of 1812, called the Comedy of Japan in my stupid college. So, first get started, just explain basically. Okay, so yeah, first part, I called it Act 1 for dramatic reasons. It'll be about an hour, and I will just be focusing on this year's plays, and after that I will recap the big stuff from last year and connect the two together. It's supposed to be like accessible to new students as I do this each year, but also to build on itself. So, ground rules. It's a lot what exactly counts for this project. There's obviously a lot of varying theatrical events that happen on campus, so this is the specifically worded definition I've come up with. Standalone theatrical plays staged before an audience. So just standalone plays, not things like Quick or the directing showcases that would add like 20 plays to this list. Not operas or just like collections of short works and scenes like acting class showcases. Staged before an audience, includes staged readings. And at Oberlin College, keyword being at, I went really back and forth on Spring Awakening and World Goes Round, and I asked a lot of people, and I eventually decided to just stick to on campus, but still, all of this leaves us with 26 fucking as you can see, the theater department main stages and lab streets, and also Haymarket and Subproject 150, and C3 on-campus music theater shows, OMTA assisted shows, and a bunch of other sort of student-run things that have happened this year that we will talk about. So, first, like sometimes I will reference specific things in scripts and like bring up screenshots and quote things, especially because sometimes there's like stage directions and things that are important but aren't explicitly seen on stage. But we're talking about our production. If something in the blocking or the ad-libbing or whatever like changes what's in the script, then I'm taking what happens in the production as canon. And speaking of which, how do we deal with things that vary night to night? From little ad-lib bits to something as crazy as Bob or Dice. Or like last year's organ on the list. There kind of isn't a way I can think of to declare one performance to be the definitive one, you know? Like, you pick opening night, or you pick closing night, or you pick one. It's not really a good way to do it, so I'm counting all performances as like ways things could have gone. And that's not an invited dress, that's a rehearsal. Well, also, this is a big, just kind of guiding principle, theatrical suspension of disbelief. Sometimes plays break the fourth wall, or they'll take an element like literally that other plays don't take literally, and so many times I found it's so easy to fall down the rabbit hole of like, if this is literal, does that mean this is literal, and is the music literal, and is the blocking literal, and if two characters are facing each other literal, is this character talking to the audience, or are they just singing their thoughts facing the audience because that's how blocking works? It is messy, and I really try to stick to just kind of just sticking to like what plays intentionally, like when they intentionally break the fourth wall, and just suspension of disbelief. It's live theater. The first is one of the most important shows I need to talk about. So let's talk about Stupid Fucking Bird. It is a loose take / subversion / whatever on The Seagull by Chekhov. Centers around struggling playwright Conrad, the guy from the last slide. It's very meta-theatrical. Everyone constantly talks about the fact that they're in a play and talks to the audience. They acknowledge that they're in a play so goddamn much. There's even a bit at the beginning where all the characters hold playbills of Stupid Fucking Bird that like match the posters. It is very clearly they know that they are in a play, and all seems like relatively normal. You know, it's just a play where they break the fourth wall. And then interesting things happen in Act 2. And we need to talk about there's a scene in the second act. The characters talking about combat play that's here somewhere. And they're talking about like, oh, I think you sent me the script a while ago. I don't remember the name. Like, they don't really remember what his play is about. And then Mosh turns directly to the audience and says, it's called Stupid Fucking Bird. And on the Saturday night performance, Searle, under the direction of Nathan Greeley, stood up and said, that's the show! This is really interesting. Like, see, I wish I could play the clip. I watched it several times, but Mosh like points to Owen and goes like, "Yes." This is interesting because it establishes that the characters don't just know they're in a play. Their play has been like created by Conrad, as in, like Conrad says, the play that he's writing is called Stupid Fucking Bird, and we are told that that is the name of the show. So, not only do these characters know they are play, but somehow it is Conrad's. And let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So Conrad has like made this play in some way, and at the beginning of the play, he like cues the audience to start it. At the end, he also cues for it to stop, like he is in control somehow. And he also talks a whole lot about, like in a very meta-theatrical way, about how in this play he's like trying over and over to fix his life from production to production until the end of time, and he's like trying and failing to fix his life. It appears that the play that we're watching, Stupid Fucking Bird, is like a sort of altered reality that he is shaping around him. He is shaping reality around him and attempting to fix his life, which is weird. And how the fuck can he do that? Let's talk about his character. Oh shit. So this section 1, like I said, I try to keep it as self-contained as possible for this year, but there's a couple times where I have to like really briefly recap things from last year. So brief recap. Last year we had these gods called the Watchers, introduced in the Field of Oregon. Huge eldritch gods that exist above like everything in existence, and they're represented by the audience. So like some fourth wall breaks like have significant meaning because they are interacting with the Watchers. Also, they have links to like Oberlin College and University. We're going to talk a lot more about that later. But to circle back, in Stupid Fucking Bird, obviously there's a lot of interaction with the audience, with the Watchers, the gods. So at Conrad's parents, there's a scene in which his mother Emma is talking to the audience, and she talks about a man that she had Conrad with named Dixon McCree. She turns right to the audience and says, "Dixon McCree, remember him?" Which is a weird line because he is not a previously established character. He doesn't come up anywhere else in the play. And I was like, oh, I guess this is like a real life famous actor. He's not. This is the only reference to Dixon McCready in the play or anywhere in his life. So like, what the fuck does that mean? Who is Dixon McCready? Well, I think the reason why she asks the audience if they remember who Dixon McCready is because he's one of them. If Conrad is the son of a mortal person and a god, that could explain how he's able to like shape reality around him, but not completely. You know, he talks about failing and he's not fully able to control everything because he's like a demigod, able to alter reality to an extent. Now, really interestingly, in the aforementioned scene where Mosh says the title of the play, everyone is, like, in the dialogue and in the acting, I've also rewatched this scene several times, everyone acts like they don't know what they don't, like when they're asking Conrad about his new play, Stupid Fucking Bird, no one acts like tongue-in-cheek or fourth wall breaking, except Mosh, we'll get to that. Everyone, like, talks about it as if it's just a play he's writing that they don't know about, which is really weird, because at the beginning of the show, they all had, like, the playbill that said Stupid Fucking Bird. Like, at the beginning of the show, they appear to know that not only are they in a play, they are in Conrad's play. But at this point, they don't, which is very odd. So I propose that, in addition to manipulating his life, he's also manipulating the people around him. They start off being aware that he's in their play, and at some point their memories are removed, as he says in the text, he is like trying to fix his life over and over from production to production, and it's not working. Also, in the Owen Searle call-out, one of the watchers warning these people that the play they're in is in fact Stupid Fucking Bird. Because again, they know they are in a play, but Owen Searle says, Stupid Fucking Bird, that's the name of the show. Like,
that's why I did it.
That's not just Conrad's play, that is the play that you're in. And then Mosh, also, again, for some reason, she knows that they're in Conrad's play, and she also, like, very clearly responds to Owen. And again, put a pin in those.
That's water break! Sorry.
Let's shift focus for a little bit. Trust me, this will help us explain Stupid Fucking Bird. Wet Skeleton. This is a really weird and abstract play if you've seen it. So I'm going to spend a couple slides just kind of like explaining like actual, not like my theorizing, just like actual artistic intent from Gabriel that I learned while working on the show and also like sitting in on table work.
Much needed, by the way.
Yes. It's about this. It takes place in a weird crummy basement where this married couple, Reed and Gail, discover a moistened skeleton, and from there everything just like spirals into absolute weird nightmare hellscape. So let's talk about the characters. There's a guy named Second Policeman. There is no first policeman. A second policeman shows up to investigate the skeleton, and later, like, even though initially he appears to just be meeting Reed and Gale, later, like, they say that he's their son, and then that's just kind of true for the rest of the play. Again, it's weird. It's a weird, surreal show. There's also the ghost who is just kind of hanging around searching for his skeleton. And then the voice from the phone, the mysterious voice who kind of seems to act like a lot of different people, and also, according to Gabriel, this is also a thing we talk about a lot, is like God in a way, and has been repeatedly described as like omnipotent but not all-powerful, which should sound familiar. This play is basically like a time loop. At the end of each loop, the second policeman becomes Reed, and Reed becomes the ghost, like the ghost rips Reed's skeleton out of his body, and then during the next loop, Reed is the ghost searching for his skeleton that has been lost. Like it's looping over and over, and there's a couple of textual references that establish that we are currently seeing the third loop in the cycle. The Statesman, they have a whole like pre-show thing where they're like just kind of fucking around with the audience, and they're also gods described as like bored gods of some kind, and they have more power than the voice on the phone, and have also been described as complicit in the cycle of violence. They interact with a box with the audience, and also at the beginning of the show, and also with a box in the middle of the show, they they wet the skeleton before the show starts, so they're very complicit in whatever the hell is going on here. And like we said, they're sort of gods, and they appear to have more power than the voice on the phone, which is interesting. Now, so I was like, I'll just grab a picture of the top of the bean, and that's but, as I said, voice on the phone is a god that has been described as being like omnipotent but not all-powerful, which reminds me a lot of how Conrad is able to manipulate the world around him to some godly extent, but not completely. But like similarity, but like that's not enough to claim that they're the same person 100%. Like it's not like, I don't know, Wet Skeleton set designer Noah Lyford is gonna put a visual detail on a Wet Skeleton and in an attempt to fuck with me that accidentally confirms Conrad having connections to Wet Skeleton. Oh wait! Seagull-eyed, they recognize, these are not the playbills that were handed out to y'all, audience members. These are the fake playbills that the Stupid Fucking Bird characters use when they're on stage. Like, literally, in the world of Stupid Fucking Bird, they have these playbills. And here's one on the Wet Skeleton set, where we also have a godlike figure who is omnipotent but not all-powerful. Yeah, so Conrad is the voice of the And therefore, As you said, the voice on the phone is like God in a way, so Conrad is kind of God, but again, not completely omnipotent and not completely able to do everything he wants. I remember saying this during the presentation last year, but like I don't remember the order of every slide, and I keep being about to hit the button, and I'm like, I don't remember what's coming next, and I don't know if I set it up properly. Right, okay, so, second police van becomes Reed, who becomes the ghost at the end of each loop, and we have now established that Conrad is the voice on the phone. But Gail, like remember Reed and Gail, they're a couple. We don't know who Gail is yet, and how exactly she fits into this. So, we're going to sort of talk about variations on a love theme now, because it hasn't happened yet. It's opening this evening, and also tomorrow and Tuesday. Right now, I'm kind of just going to give some information like out of context, and it's like, trust me, bro, the evidence. So, when early on in the year, I think, I found a lot of similarities between Gail and Mosh, and I had just like a gut feeling that they were connected somehow. So Gail shows slightly more like power and awareness in those around her. Specifically, she is the one who declares second policeman to like be her son, and these are quotes from I think Gabriel and other people during table work, and also just while working on the show. Like I'll just like rush to jot down the exact words someone says, but there are several moments where she like asserts something that is true, and it kind of just becomes true to the world around them. And she's able to do this more than the other characters in general. And then, out of context every variations, like we said, Conrad is a demigod, son of a watcher, and I believe there are more watcher offspring out there. And I believe, again, this is very out of context because I can't talk about variations with spoilers, but I believe Gail and Mosh are the same person and a child of a watcher and have similar abilities to Conrad. And this would help explain why Mosh remains aware of what Conrad is doing in Stupid Fucking Bird. Like even when the other characters don't know they're in his play, she still does. She has more awareness because she is like him. He cannot completely control her. Then he tries to and then when she tries to expose him to the others, which that's the show, that's the name of the show, and her pointing and emphasizing that connection, he traps her in wet skeleton. Simmer down. A brief clip, and pay attention to Reed and Gail's reaction. This is, oh right, I need to explain what happened here. The Sunday afternoon showing of Wet Skeleton, Nathan Greeley, the original instigator of this bit, was in the audience, and so Owen and Gabriel asked him to do that. That's the show, that's the name of the show. They say Wet Skeleton like a minute into the show. So, I'm gonna play a brief clip, watch Reed and Gail's reaction.
Wet Skeletons who are pressing issue. That's the show, that's the name of the show.
What's really interesting is that Reed very briefly looks at Nathan Greeley and then just kind of goes back to what he was doing, and later I will explain why that could be so casual, but Reed barely acknowledges it. Gail stares intensely at Nathan Greeley, and it goes further than this clip. It's like a solid 20 seconds. As if she recognizes that bit, because she is Mosh and she remembers that bit happening. There's still a lot of stuff we don't quite know about what's going on. Why would Conrad be involved in this and be trapping Gail in this weird nightmare hellscape? Which, speaking of which, where is this? What is this? Why is there a title? What's this up? What the fuck is really going on? And also a lot of questions, but I believe I've got answers. To talk about another surreal play where I kind of just have to explain some of the actual stuff. This is a very abstract, some through one-act musical. Water. God damn. It's an abstract story that takes place in a location known as the Infinite Forest, and it is told in second person. The main character is called You, and as specified in the script, and also I worked on the show and we just talked about it a lot, You represents everyone in the audience. There are moments where You is expressing their internal thoughts and they look directly at individual audience members. But how? Oh yeah, sorry. And also, the show is called The Answer, and there's around the beginning of the story, this thing is introduced called The Question, which is what will happen when the story ends. And the show follows you as they journey to find the, you know, the. I haven't done the time crunch for a lot of the slideshow, but sometimes I'm like, there's a visual gag I'm now willing to sacrifice. But anyway, so you journey through the infinite forest and meeting various characters and finding the answer. And again, it's an abstract show, and sometimes the answer is kind of treated as if it's an actual like thing or object you can find. But at the very end, they return to the city that they grew up in and that they originally left from. And this little scene happens, which you probably might have seen this in the theater and been a little bit confused, which is kind of part of the intention. But at the end, at the very end of the play, there's this scene where you like sort of find the answer and like exist beyond your story. You can read the words on the screen. But yeah, you go like beyond the story. So, but like you represents every audience member, but if you as every audience member, that means that all of the watchers, which, how would that work? Because the watchers are all of the audience members. There are a gazillion eldritch gods, and you is one person who is very much not a god. So like, how could that work? How could how could all of these gods have gone through one experience, like depicted through this one person? So if we jump back into Wet Skeleton, take a look at this diagram. So at the end of each loop, oh wait, I have a pointer. At the end of each loop, second policeman Reed becomes the ghost, and then afterwards, at the end of the show, like everything has kind of gone downhill, and the ghost he rips Reed's skeleton out and tries to put it in his body, but he fails, and he's like crashing out for a solid 15 minutes long. And then at the end, the stagehands just drag him off stage, and we don't know what happens to him. And it's like, and we talked in the process of the show, it's like he's dying in a way, but like, again, the stagehands, who are these like gods who break the fourth wall, are dragging him off stage, which is weird. So anyway, if we look at a diagram, so every loop, like in the play, it's talked about that second policeman is like being born, like he literally just emerges from a box. And also, his father is Reed, so like each loop a new second policeman is born. I don't know if it's, you know, if it's just like he's somehow abstractly born from Reed, or there are several lines that kind of compare second policeman and the ghost skeleton, and like since Christianity is semi-canon, I'm like, can you make sure it's home, like in the Adam and Eve? I don't know, but however it logically works out, every loop, a second policeman is born, but like from Reed and or the ghost. And at the end of every loop, another ghost is created. So from one person, we have several different people standing, and at the end of each loop, a ghost has been created and dragged off stage by the stagehands. So we are ending every loop. Conversations from the Web Skeleton Discord, but like at the end of every loop, we are left with another ghost being created and then being dragged off stage by the stagehands who break the fourth wall. And oh wait, I don't know why I put the slide in again, but oh shit. We have one person becoming many fucked up, tormented, transformed supernatural entities. And this could be how one person, you, becomes a zillion gods. And again, they're getting dragged off stage by the stagehands, and they are becoming the Watchers, fourth wall breaking entities outside of the story. So yeah, you becomes every Watcher through the process of White Skeleton. So, who did this to you? And also, again, where exactly are we? So, I think it was the Watchers themselves. Because at the end of the play, when the ghost is, again, crashing out for 15 solid minutes, he like directly begs the audience to help him, and they do nothing. And also, we are told that the stagehands are complicit in what's going on, but not necessarily like the ones running the show. And if Watchers are, you know, above everything, above the story, fourth wall breaking entities, perhaps the stagehands are just working for them. Yeah, they refuse to help the ghost, and I think they are the ones like controlling this whole fucked up time loop thing. As in, like, it's kind of a weird, I forget what it's called, like a bootstrap paradox, where like you go back in time and you like set in motion events that you knew were going to happen. Like they kidnapped their past self, put them through this fucked up torture in order to like bring them to who they are in the future. Like the Watchers basically set in motion their own origin story. And I guess they just consider it, you know, a necessary torture for them to go through in order to become super powerful gods. So, we now know pretty much every character in West Skeletons and how they got there. Where are they? Well, towards the end of the game, you fall off of a mountain into what's described as like the edge of infinity. Like you go beyond space and time. It talks about like space gets thinner and then it leaves you, and then you like you draw space around you and create a little room, a little liminal space that's stated several times to have no entrance or exit. And you meet the puppet, who is like a sort of weird, like, alternate/future version of you, but that's like gone bad or gone kind of fucked up. Yeah, that's on track. So a fucked up puppet version of you sounds a lot like a certain West Skeleton character that we haven't talked about. Gail brings in like a fucked up version of the second policeman, and she claims it is now her son. And also, again, this is just like artistic intent from Gabriel, who we've talked about a lot. It is the devil from the Bible. Being born, which kind of checks out with how we see it behaving in the play. Like, it starts out imitating the voices of the characters around it, and at first it's just repeating individual words, and then it's repeating phrases, and then sentences, and then it's making its own sentences, you know, like a mimic of some kind. And it is also you, and the effigy is the puppet of the second policeman. That means the effigy is the puppet. So basically, when he draws the space around you, they're in a place where like time and space is weird and there's overlap. So they meet the effigy, a far future fucked up offshoot of them. Yeah, so the space that you create will later become the surreal time-bending spaces. Okay. The devil appears in a Brighton called Day. So he appears in this one under the name Air Sweats. Yeah. This is straight up the devil visiting the characters. And he like talks to them about how he like they ask him about his like origins and his history, and he gives this whole cool poetic monologue about how he started as like primordial evil and develops over time and blah blah blah. But there's this really interesting line where he tells one of the characters he gave birth to himself, which is a really weird line and immediately stuck out to me in context of West Skeleton, because if the devil is the effigy, this can accomplish like the second policeman is some, but also the second policeman is Reed, so like saying he gave birth to himself, but also say just as the Watchers were kind of creating their own origin story, the devil could be helping with helping with this whole fucked up nightmare time loop, and so he is leading to his own creation, the creation of the effigy. Which there are some references in the play implying that they are like in hell in some form. So perhaps the space that you formed gets like moved into hell. So basically, the Watchers and the devil, who are a sort of offshoot of them, work together to put you through this torment that will eventually become Watchers. This you probably won't see this, but this is like an old rough sketch from West Skeleton production that kind of just lays out similar stuff and talks about the characters being in hell. So yeah, what it said. Okay. Oh shit. Next section. Okay. Well, not to totally pivot away from the Watchers yet, but to pivot a little bit from the insane god stuff. Let's talk about from last year. So Oberlin College, and again, I explained this last year, so I'm not going to go over like the evidence again. But Oberlin College was created by the Watchers, and it's like a connection for them to the mortal world. And this is like why a lot of fourth wall breaks specifically talk as if they're in Oberlin, because again I talked about this last year, but it's like the Watchers sort of project the image of like a theatrical performance at Oberlin College, and that was how I explained like characters talking as if they are in a, as if they are in a theatrical performance at Oberlin specifically. So does this mean anything useful to us this year? Yes, it does. Standing strong. So, standing strong, there's a lot going on in standing strong. It's a fully divided piece, and there's a lot of different scenes and monologues and just stuff happening. Most audience interaction is kind of casual, like a lot of plays this year have characters casually interact with the audience. But there are certain things that stand out of it, especially the ending, which is they're talking about a whole bunch of social political issues and specifically talking to the audience. Again, the watchers, and giving them a very direct call to action, which is kind of weird. But I would like to interpret this as a sort of prayer, as in this, the watchers are gods, and they're literally telling them to eat your so I think standing strong has kind of a water pull. And I think I made a slide in that. No, okay. I don't know how far back it goes. So we'll go back to 1833 or further. Here's someone else who surprisingly is, I think, connected to Oberlin. Hand of the Sword. Hand of the Sword follows grad student and fantasy writer named Hazel, who gets, and her teacher, Arthur Adamson, casts a magic spell that sends her into her story, and it's supposed to give her a new, literally give her a new perspective on her story. And it is the play does tell us that this has been done to other students, he does this with different students. There's past students at the school who are it really helped me get inside my story. It's a magic.
Get inside my story.
So when she goes into her story, she meets the villain Duke Elric, who's also played by Sky, who plays Arthur. And he tells her that he is Arthur and is fully aware of her life in the real world. Like I said, sometimes I don't remember what's coming next. I'm hold on. And she meets other characters in her story who are parallel to real world people, but they're supposed to be just projections. I asked Namji about one of the writers. I asked him about whether the Duke was literally Arthur. He said it's kind of up to interpretation and it's supposed to be a little ambiguous. There was also a scene where he uses a magical pen, which the magical pen is an in-universe thing in the fictional land of Ildai. He rewrites Barkeep into various characters to give Hazel a creative writing exercise. One of the characters he creates is just straight up Hannah Aldor. But anyway, so he has knowledge of specific people at Oberlin, which is weird when he's at another school. So I think that he's we previously discussed, there is a watcher cult of sorts in Oberlin, and I think he might be a part of that. I'm also going to go more in depth about that a lot later, but also to put it out there, a rule I sort of went by last year was maybe there's a person from real life who's in a play, but it doesn't mention their last name, and maybe it's free real estate for theorizing. And there is a standing strong cast member named Arthur who, in the script, doesn't say his last name. Would interpret that as Arthur Edison. Just putting it out there. Some of the characters in Standing Strong, it mentions their last name, and some of them it doesn't. And I'm treating them like fictional characters in the universe, as we do with any of these plays that we come to life. So, Arthur has access to magic spells that bring written words to life, and presumably other magic things. And I think, and again, I will go much more into depth later. I can't fully yet, but I think the Watchers are interested in fostering writers so that they can use magic to bring stories to life and stuff. And I scoured Fun Home, and I had no ideas for it, but maybe connects here. I don't know. Next one. Okay. Check what slides are there. I don't know how to
Already do you think you're getting clear audio? What? Do you think you're getting good audio? Clear enough audio?
I got my phone. I'm scrolling.
Yeah. Last year was
Okay.
recorded.
Yes. Let's talk about Stranger Things even more. The character of Joyce in the musical is Winona Ryder. You know, the character of Joyce, played by Winona Ryder in the TV show. That's not what I mean. I mean, she's literally Winona Ryder. There is a song in this musical in which Joyce has flashbacks to faint memories of literally being Winona Ryder. And the expressions repeatedly talk about her having split personalities and hallucinating characters from not Winona Ryder films, from her past films. This is just straight up the bit. This is what happens when a parody musical happens in this school because they do dumb bits and then just treat them as objective fact and okay. So for some reason, Joyce, just a woman living in a small town in 1983, is Winona Ryder. It also has memories of several Winona Ryder movies that came out later in the 80s or even later in the 90s. So how is this possible? So how somehow transported from the present, or the latest film of hers that's referenced is Little Women in 1994. So sometime around the present, she's sent back in time and turns into a child again because she talks about having the Winona visions as a child, and also memory wipe and takes on a new identity. So this is a lot. How did this happen? Well, if we look at the weird whole movie, and also kind of told in the show, yes. In this TV show, as well as in the musical, 11, one of the main characters, is experimented on by the government, and she has psychic powers which stem from the Upside Down. Also, a quick mention, in Wilder Ducks, there's this realm called Flame Shadow that's literally described as existing between the mortal realm and the underworld, and it's a dark reflection of the above world, and Conrad has literally said it's like in Stranger Things. We'll talk about Robin Oliveira. So 11 has been psychically experimented on, and so I thought maybe they could be responsible for brainwashing Winona Ryder. I haven't explained the time travel yet, but maybe they could have brainwashed her. Because we have confirmation that they are able to successfully brainwash people because of it started out seemingly like a comedy special, originally I wasn't going to include it because I was oh, it's a comedy special, not a play. And then very quickly an actual plot kicks in, interrupting an in-universe comedy special. Basically, in-universe fictional comedian Rose Kelly is doing a comedy special, and also Joe Biden is just canonically their soundboard off. And Dick Cheney co-wrote their script, so those are just canon in the universe, I guess. That's the political landscape of this universe. She's interrupted by a voiceover saying her sleeper agent trigger phrase, and then she marches off stage, and then she was about to do a bit with a clone that was grown for her by Palantir, and her clone, who also believes her name is Charlie Church. But to focus on Rose, when her sleeper agent activation, she specifically says it's because of the CIA. But then she starts repeating "death to the American Empire," which is really weird. And at the end of the play, it said that she tried to assassinate a government official. So she was brainwashed by the CIA. We were very clearly told. But she's being sent on an assassination mission by some Russian special ops who somehow got a hold of her trigger face. And then Stranger Things, and it's explicitly said that Dr. Brenner, who's the one doing the psychic experiments, is colluding with the Russians, allowing them to access his info. Thus, and also MK Ultra comes up with Subproject 150 and also in Stranger Things, and this could be an extension of that. Basically, the US government is doing fucked up psychic experiments as seen in Stranger Things, and they still do that until the present, but also the Russians have secret input into it, which is how we're able to access Williams' trigger phrase. But how does this blood/mind experiment thing with Winona Ryder sent back in time? Completely out of context. Let me explain. this is kind of another thing where it's like, if you saw the scene, it makes sense. Right before Arthur Amundsen, when he's like meeting with Hazel and he tells her, I think you need to get inside your story, and then she leaves and he takes out the magical book. Right before that, he's offering Kit Kats to her. He's really weirdly interested in Kit Kats. I immediately noticed that when I was watching it. But shout out Nadia Salt for giving me this idea. As a Kit Kat could have been laced with like magical drugs, and this is like part of the spell. Like perhaps like the drugs are there as sort of a, I don't know, like a stimulant. Like she takes the magic drugs and then he does the spell. But anyway, he's really insistent on these possibly magical drugs. And they could send someone to a fictional story. Who's to say there couldn't be magical drugs that could send someone back in time? So I'm saying that the U.S. government has access to magical drugs and they are testing on people. And in the production of Annie that really just happened last night, production opening up on washed up early 20s drug addict Annie. She takes some drugs and then she like relives her childhood, so relive kind of the events of the normal Annie play. And at first it just seems like a flashback and not like literal time travel, but then like weird inconsistencies start like modern references, and then also it's like a 1935, and then Isaac Slater improvised a fucking Hamlet with drums reference, and I saw this at like 9:30 p.m. last night when I was halfway through the slideshow, and I was freaking the fuck out. That is more like references to Hamlet with drums, and I will talk later about where that is in the timeline, but let me just say for right now that no normal person in the modern day should be able to know what Hamlet with drums is. Other characters, including Daddy Warbucks, know things for the present day, or because this is Annie's like gross recollection of things, she knows about like things in different time periods and Hamlet with drums, which she was not supposed to be able to know about. But if she's taking magic drugs, as seen in Hamlet's Sword, she could be both tripping and going back in time. But also, like, she's going back in time to her childhood, and she's like becoming a child again, like physically almost. And I think Daddy Warbucks planted the drugs at the club in mind, because the U.S. government is doing magic drug experimentation, and later in the play, he does explicitly mention in dialogue that he has like strong connections in the FBI, so strong governmental connections, big rich guy who's seemingly nice, and then he shows up and she usually takes potentially magic drugs. Not a coincidence, I think. Like put all of those like scattered ideas together a little bit more. I think sometime around the present, U.S. government uses she's sent back in time. It said in Stranger Things that she's 40 years old in 1983, so she's sent to like the late 40s again. It's no she's a child. Nothing else was going on at that time, and wow, a completely homeless child with no attachments who could just disappear and be used for fucked up experiments. It sounds great if you're a U.S. government agent trying to do, MK Ultra. Like, only slightly more fucked up than real life MK Ultra, but they brainwash her, they make her take on a different identity, and I think she's specifically sent to the town of Hawkins because, it's got like a portal to another dimension in it, so there's already a lot of government surveillance, as we see reference to very often, so like, there's government guys in the area, they can keep an eye on her. This is a great place to keep a test subject. And I also think the police chief Hopper, one of the main characters, he's also in on it because, again, she has memories of Winona Ryder films that haven't happened yet, including Beetlejuice, which comes out in the 90s, and Hopper fucking takes out the handbook for Beetlejuice and says he got it at Universal Studios, which could not be possible if the movie has not come out. So I think he's also in on it because he has objects from the future that directly relate to her identity as Winona Ryder. That's not a coincidence. And also I think they're testing another bit that just happens in the play and is canon the whole thing is that Will, Joyce's son, is just essentially Muppet. Like, there are several scenes where it's implied that he grew up on Sesame Street and knew Jim Henson and misses it, sitting by his TV crying watching the Muppet Show. And so I think they took a Muppet and I don't know how they brought him to life. Fucked up experiments with the Upside Down, but I think the reason that Hopper is a part of the secret experiment is because he has a dead daughter, and I think they're experimenting into bringing a child to life, and I think he wants to bring his daughter to life, and that's why he's that's why he's like, that's why he's like in on it, but also in the middle of the story, he ends up changing alliances because he's not like fully evil. He just had like a motive, but then kind of realized that the government experimentation was going too far. Okay, so crazy magic, drug, time travel stuff. Some of these plays we'll talk about more later. Let's shift to a new section. Several people who are not who they seem, I think. So yes! Is the bard's sidekick to Astrid, the fictional hero. And he's just a normal guy, and then there's a bit in the script where the actor's supposed to ad-lib and just like start telling a boring story to like put the devil dog to sleep or something. And Alvaro decided to just ad-lib references to different shows each day. So Friday night he references the plot of Ghost House. Already really weird that this guy within a story knows about something that like one of the plays that happened. And then Saturday afternoon, he makes the most fourth wall-breaking fourth wall that you could make, literally referencing the project in me. I'm Ken and Pen in the Sword. But yeah, which immediately suggests that somehow he is at the level of the Watchers. I don't know. Again, we have the Watchers and we have the stagehands and Conrad who are roughly at their level. And I was like, is Cadigan a Watcher? Is he at their level? Is he working for them? What exactly is going on? Saturday night, we find out that he's aware of Wet Skeleton, which we already know he's connected to the Watchers somehow, so it isn't really anything new, but it's weird. And then Saturday afternoon, he says, and that's the word he said. I opened the Ambar and went on a journey to find the answer. Which means, just straight up, Cadigan is to find the answer. He knows the plot of the answer. He is just straight up a Watcher. With a very simple question. What is he doing? Oh wait, this is such a good piece. Even though I probably made this at like midnight last night, sometimes I'm unwilling to compromise the visual bit. Here's the question though: if Cadigan is a Watcher, why is he here in like a story within a story? And also, like I can believe that Bacon's just keeping his true nature a secret from everyone around him for whatever reason, but like even when we see him alone in the story, he doesn't just like, leave because he's a god or whatever. He's like still in the plot and he's still in legit danger and he gets trapped and he's still like in the story. So like not acting very omnipotent. He could, if you were a god above all, you could just leave what's going on and you could just leave whenever he wants, presumably. So again, we know that he was a Watcher, or is a Watcher. But that next question, why isn't he like able to leave this story? Well, if we go back to the Owen I think a likely explanation is a fallen Watcher kind of thing. Because as you saw, Moss was punished for like warning the stupid fucking bird characters. But what about the person who told them that's the show that they're in? Yeah, trying to warn characters about something bad that was going on. And so I think Cadigan is this Watcher, the Owen Sherrill Watcher. Exiled, vanished, fucking 2 layers of reality down to a story within a story. But what exactly would make this one Watcher different? Why would this one be rebelling? Well, what if they're like I said, in Wet Skeleton, there's like a ghost produced each time loop. So like the first ghost produced would be, I guess, the most like original Watcher, or, the one that's like closest to the experience of you, original of sorts. So I think this is who does that to show us the name of the show bit, and then eventually gets exiled, becoming Cadigan. Yeah, crazy shit. Speaking of characters who aren't who they claim to be, let's talk about Ghost House. I started working on like the slides for this presentation on this section, and I realized that like it's really hard for me to talk about this without stuff last year, so it's gonna sound really shaky right now, and I am going to provide more evidence later. Remember I've been the show where Jackson and his sister Margot and his friend Taylor all like describe their dream blood rotations. It's fun, you know, people named historical figures and superheroes, and fucking Julia Argelon did types of birds like every day one of the nights, and her last list item was always Obama. And Jackson, again, a no lifer again trying to fuck with me. This is one of his. One night he lists just straight up pure faculty members. Another one he lists just goes out to core team members. I don't know if these are watchers or people in a universe in Oberlin, but it's really weird for him to be so attached to Oberlin people. And then there's, I believe it was the Saturday afternoon performance, the one that threw me for a fucking loop. It's hard to avoid that for right now. So right now, oh wait, shit, hold on. So like right now, we're kind of gonna focus on Natasha, Pierre, and Ernest Worthingdale because hey, what the fuck? And also just to speak a little bit out of context, Daddy Longlegs is like. It was in a play last year, and it is a private nickname between two people in the early 1900s. He absolutely should not be aware of that. And yeah, what I've been saying for the past minute or two. Trust me for a second. I think, again, I think it was a puzzle, and also a changeling, which is a species introduced in wild design that originally was here and later becomes Jack's aka Earth Worthing, and that's kind of all I can say about that right now. But like I said, there is evidence in Act 2. Trust, I was working on the slide list, and I was like, I shouldn't be talking about Jackson right now, but I put him on the on the title card for this section. But anyway, Jackson, put a video in and talk about even more people with secrets to hide. There's a drummer artist going to show. Last year I didn't like consider pit musicians to be anything like lore relevant because they were never really acknowledged in shows. Because the drummer also plays the Ghost of Hamlet's father. Like, this is just straight up a character who died in the universe who's also a pit musician, and that's weird. And I was like, oh, maybe there's like. I was like, maybe like all pit musicians are ghosts. Is that really possible? Roughly. So there's a little bit in Ghost House. In that, so when the main character Ray meets Noah, he says that he's never met another ghost before, but in like the first scene, there's a bit where he interacts with members of the pit orchestra, and I was like, fuck, the pit members can't be ghosts, because Ray said he's never met another ghost. And I like asked Alvaro about this specifically, because earlier we're showing like after Ray dies, he's at the gates of heaven, and then it's, well, actually I don't need to explain the whole plot of the show, but he's at the gates of heaven and he can't go yet, so he's haunting on Earth. But he meets St. Peter, and I'm like, hey Alvaro, isn't that a dead guy? Isn't that a ghost? And he was like, well, technically not really a ghost because they're like in heaven and they're not like tethered to Earth like Ray is. So it's a little bit of a stretch, but like this is the one confirmation to the pit ghost theory. That like pit ghosts are not necessarily like on Earth the same way Ray is, but rather like projecting themselves from the afterlife. So a couple of the times pit ghosts are not. I have this saxophone. There's a saxophonist, and then like one of the characters once, which obviously the characters in that play talk about the fact that they're going to play a lot, and I can kind of believe that they would be able to not be a musician. Also, as you like it, people interact with the pit a lot. I don't really know what the deal is with that, but like it's the early 1600s and people talk about magic and wizards and they're like, yeah, those are real, I'm pretty sure. Only that people would be chilling with actual ghosts and like it's the 1600s. This is not the last very more relevant character you're playing, but the first player is a figure who not only plays like a member, the leader of the tragedian troupe and universe, but also appears in this play as many different people, very fourth wall breaking. I have a lot of quotes when I'm talking about her, some of them from Ryland, some of them from Isaac. I did a lot of interviewing people for this project. She's basically sort of like described before, vengeful angel or like vengeful spirit, who's the only one able to interact with the human and ghost world, and she also plays an instrument underscoring parts in the show, and also guides souls to the afterlife, which I think all that adds a little bit to the pit ghost theory. Like, she's a musician, and also the first player, which kind of implies that she could be like a leader of sorts, which makes sense because she like guides like dead souls and like guides them to music. But yeah, so also I want to like sort of talk about Haymarket. The thing is, I didn't have a lot of ideas for Haymarket this year, and like this is a tricky case where, unlike other shows where we have normal human characters and they address musicians who are there, Haymarket, everyone is playing instruments always, and there's like for example, at the end when some of the characters get executed, like their guitars get hung, and I'm like, or get hanged, and I don't, and I'm like, we're not gonna take this literally. It's not like the state of Chicago sentenced 4 guys to murder and then they brought their guitars. So Haymarket is an odd case where I think there's something you said, like there's these directions there's these stage directions that happen a little differently in blocking, but stage directions that talk about like how we tell our story from the bandstand, but we like live the story on the stage. So I think maybe there's something in this of like ghosts in the afterlife telling their story through music. I don't know exactly, but I didn't really have much else to talk about for Haymarket, so I wanted to bring this up as a rough and ethical thing. Okay, yes. So, next section. Why do they call it sun when we sung the Father, Son, and Son, God, outside, eat the food cardboard and can? It's my longest notes doc. I have 7 pages of notes on this thing, and it is. And I also sat down for a lengthy warranty when I scoured through the Google Drive. So that's geography that's roughly based on Earth. Like you can kind of make out like vague continents and things, but not really. Like it is similar to Earth, and Conrad has. And I'm specifying Conrad as the director of the region. But yeah, Conrad has said this is like sort of Earth, or like or there's like a world in which it could have been Earth or it could be Earth, but it's a little different. There's a whole bunch of other non-human species, and also the world is like ruled by angelic royalty, and it takes place in the 1700s. My initial idea, I have a lot of initial ideas, but my initial idea was like it's another planet, and they just happen to also have humans and things. But then in the actual shows, a lot of shit happens. there are like several like Earth pop culture references. All carts whose name I could maybe pass off as a coincidence, but in Scotland, Mary the Dead mentions Robin Hood, and I had explanations for like, and also like I said, they're the 1700s, and these are screenshots from official war slideshows that say before Christ. Sure, Christ existed. That means we'll talk about that. I had answers to all of these, and I will spare you the details of those answers because they got completely chucked in the trash. And the Sunday afternoon performance, Cuthbert Gunter. The line, when Conrad starts talking about flame shadow, which again is another name for the upside down, Cuthbert says like, oh, like in the show Stranger Things. And another character, I think Lyra or something, another character mentions having seen the show, Lenore mentions having seen the show Stranger Things. And I had to like completely rework everything, and again, it's a whole bunch of behind the scenes under the hood stuff, but the explanation, it's just about explanations that happened. But the best explanation to come up with, and I will raise that one, is apocalyptic. So, oh wait. Okay, first to explain, before we get to how this could exist in a post-apocalyptic world, what apocalypse am I talking about? Well, if you were here last year, you would know that there were like 3 near end-of-the-world events around the year 2030. Luckily, I don't need to talk about this right now because we get a end-of-the-world event this year. Let's talk about Yetis a little bit. Where are Yetis would be? It is in many, like somewhat it appears to be a regular, like contemporary dramatic play, following these characters, and there are these Yetis that like narrate things to the audience and read out like facts and poetry and stuff, but they appear to be just metaphorical, especially when you're seeing the show, but in the script, listed at the beginning is the stretch of land between Murmansk, Russia, and Himalayas. Now, one of the characters, Mace, is writing a story about how... One of the characters, Mace, is writing a story about like the sun going out and these two guys named Benjamin and Theo, like afterwards, like going out in just...
Oh, sorry. Specifically referencing the Yowie situationship. The line addressing the Yowie situationship, the fact that in this story they have gay sex was when in Rome, do as the Romans, when in the apocalypse have gay sex, and the Romans were involved in last year's theory, so that's what's going to come up later.
We will get to that. It's a story about two guys venturing through the Himalayas. In the stretch of land between Murmansk, Russia, and the lakes, to find mythical dancing yetis. So, how can we interpret the setting of the story being that? Well, the story deals with heavy themes of blending reality and fiction. And I was like, hey, what if we have reality and fiction mixed up here? And the Yeti stuff, the story based in writing, is the actual real story. Because if the sun goes out, it would obviously leave human civilization pretty fucked. I mean, realistically, in real life, if the sun disappeared, everyone would die instantly. But it makes the story like people still like survive to some extent, and it's like weird. But we kind of just accept that the sun goes out and things are dark, but people are still alive. So in again the Wild Death timeline, we talk about how early on in the timeline people live simple lives, almost like a human civilization that's been reset. But their year numbering system is still like before Christ, and also Conrad said this world could have their own Christ in some way. What does that mean? And they also still use like the AD numbering system. So I believe that maybe in an apocalypse, like if the world is ended and kind of start over, maybe people would like restart their year numbering system. But like, what specifically would make them like restart the numbering system, and what does having their own Christ in some way mean? Well, we talked a little bit about the pantheon of gods. It has like a whole bunch of gods. There's like, I don't know, there's a lot of gods listed on Lord's slideshow somewhere. And most have been around since the beginning of time, but not necessarily forever, Conrad has said. So the main god, the one that probably heard referenced the most during live performances, is Father Sun, the god of the sun. He's like super important. So I am proposing that if the sun went out, perhaps a very important new event for people to center their new year numbering system around would be the return of the sun. But also they still call that year numbering system before Christ. So like, why would like the creation of a sun god be a new Christ? Because as we established, Conrad is God, and Christ would be like his son in some way. But how does that work out? If we look at the Lord's life, godly family tree. There's father, son, and this one, who's listed as its parent, is a god called Great Horizon. It's commonly used to represent the performing arts. Very pro-mortal, almost like he lives among mortals, almost like he is half immortal. I am saying that Conrad is a Great Horizon and gave birth to Father Son, and that was King Christ, and that was what like the post-apocalyptic year numbering system is centered around. So while the Horizon lives in the 1700s, it's really like 1,700 years in the future. But one more point on the list that also makes a little bit more world-building sense in the wake of an apocalypse. Let's talk a little bit about Hamlet's drums. So, the phrase the Hamlet conundrum appeared in a lot of my notes earlier this year. A lot of the play, it happens in the universe, the play. And yet, the stupid fucking bird characters reference the play and like quote specific text. And yet, Hamlet with drums references Julius Caesar, which Julius Caesar also happened on campus here last year. It took place in 2032, but like Hamlet is like medieval, and also our Julius Caesar production had a Hamlet reference in it. So like, and also Canada canonically sings a jazz standard, "The Song Is You," and characters call it an old tune that she's singing. So like, what the fuck is that mean? I think there's a way for. I think that Hamlet happens post-apocalyptically, and you might be asking, how would modern-day characters be referencing Hamlet the play? Like, there's got to be a Hamlet play. Well, we have already seen fictional story movies. So I'm proposing that the same kind of spells we see in Pen and Sword are used at some point in the future to bring the characters of Hamlet to life. Thus, modern-day characters can reference the Hamlet play, but also Hamlet can happen in a post-apocalyptic future, and they can reference Julius Caesar, which I could believe that there would be like an in-universe play about the assassination of Julius Caesar in 2032. But yeah, Hamlet is post-apocalyptic, but it was brought to life from the play that Shakespeare wrote centuries ago. And also, I think the first player for Hamlet brought it to life. Again, I have to describe it as between worlds and making the play happen in a way. And also, she's far before Ophelia like goes mad and starts singing the song as you. First player also plays and sings the song as if she like knows what's going to happen. And just in general, she's like much more aware of what's going on there. So this is where I leave the like just contained to this year. We will take a short break and then we will be back now. We'll recap the important bits from last year and like. Every time in the last hour that I said, oh, we'll come back to that, and there's evidence from plays last year, I will finally deliver. And believe me, it's some we are back. Congratulations, so bad. We are not. Are you watching? Welcome back. It's all sparkling tonight. Connecting 45 plays together. 2 years worth of the Open Theater Connected Universe. Or as I call it. Terrible season of the stupid fucking Yetis of stuff watching Asians while blanket. And all these amazing horse songs. Bunch of right hand important spending straining with this urban truth legally but goes come on, Daddy, back to that. Any impeccable company that takes the trail to the eternal deficiency of the Antagonist of our main horror show. First, we're gonna. Get some like good big recap out of the way from last year. So, okay. First, talking about the house. This is a metaphysical, kind of surreal space introduced last year in Eurydice Tells Orpheus Goodbye, created by Persephone, like the Greek goddess. It was later stolen somewhere around the late 1800s by this guy named the Inventor, a like evil god who like he invented time and he invented colonialism and the Industrial Revolution and all this shit like Mr. CEO of colonialism here basically. And again, this is I'm not providing evidence for this because I talked about this last year, but yeah, the Inventor modified the house, turning it into a surreal thing that travels space and time. I repeatedly compared it to the TARDIS from Doctor Who. And a slight update to my like rules regarding the house and the Watchers. So last year, some of y'all have been wondering about characters acknowledging the Watchers because last year, for various reasons, I said that like the Watchers revealed themselves to humanity in 1833 with the founding of Oberlin, and that they were widely known until the Inventor took the house and like made it so that just the like general population of the world wasn't aware of the Watchers anymore. And they were only aware if they were in the house or if they were like really powerful god or something. This is contradicted like a lot this year, like not just by one or two plays, by a lot. This is a non-acknowledged I am not going to read this out. I just typed this whole. I spent several minutes typing this out just to send the message that like that world building rule that I established does not really work. So I think that overall, throughout human history, people are, in general, aware of the Watcher's existence, going back to ancient times. If we can talk a little bit about Antigone. This was a show last year that happened like the day after, the day after I did the theory, or like the evening of, so I had to talk about it kind of like I did with Variations this year, out of context. But now we can talk about it in context. So in Antigone, the Greek chorus was like literally made from the audience, like there were projected lines for audience members to read, and over the course of the show, like the audience is like being given lines that make them agree more and more with the villain Creon, and there was a lot of direct interaction between characters and the Watchers. And this lines up with a little bit of intel we get in As You Like It, where I think that in Antigone, we're not just saying like, people know who the Watchers are, but I think in ancient Greece, people developed like rituals for summoning the audience, because in this bit in As You Like It, Jake mentioned a Greek invocation to call fools into a circle, and he like gestures to the audience, and the whole audience goes, ooh, and it's really funny. But I think he's referencing like ancient rituals that like people developed in ancient Greece. So like we've seen, a lot of people, especially in plays this year, just like interact with the watchers on a relatively common basis, but there are also specific ways to like really get their attention, and they like kind of developed those in ancient Greece. So, and also established last year, the inventor and the watchers are like on friendly terms, and they sort of work together. And like the house, the inventor stole it and used it for fucked up time-space experience, but the watchers have also repeatedly made use of it, including for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, where the titular duo, who, long story short, are Margaret and Ashley from the play Horse Girls, they're trapped in the nightmares of this real house, without memory who they were before, and also the story of Hamlet is acted out around them. Like, we determined last year that it was not really happening, but it was like actors, and you're trapped in the nightmares and surreal little liminal space and not remembering who you are before. Yeah, what skeleton is in the fucking house? It's going through this year. I was like, maybe it's not, but like, it ticks all the boxes. It is a surreal space. Time and space are fucked. The watchers have a heavy presence. But we said earlier that what skeleton was in this case is formed by you, and Persephone created the house. So like, how do those facts work together? Simple, actually. I think the inventor took the space, like again, working with the watchers. They took the space that you formed, and they sort of like merged it with the house. And that's part of how the house was able to become like a surreal place where time and space was weird. Like the inventor took the house, and he merged it with the space you made, and did a bunch of other experimentation on it. So yeah, this is, I'm not going to read out everything. This is stuff we went over last year about like, I really had like this specific graphic last year, but like, basically, the house gets passed along between a lot of people, several different groups take it over, but at some point, the most important thing for us is that at some point, ancient Romans conquer it, like in ancient Rome, they go to the late 2020s and conquer the Earth, and then it gets taken over by the characters from Rocky Horror, who are also vampires. Again, explained last year, but then eventually, they end up like wiped out, and their leader Dracula is also killed, and eventually the house just sits dormant, and Persephone takes it back. What fucking slide do I have next? We're hitting like 4 a.m. today in terms of where I'm going out. I want 40 minutes of sleep, guys. That's 40 minutes cumulative between 3 naps. Yeah. But anyway, as previously mentioned, at some point the house was in ancient Rome, and the Romans were able to capture it. And I think this connects to a little bit of what we see this year in the Comedy of Errors. Now, in the Comedy of Errors, there's 2 pairs of identical twins, Antipholus and Dromio. There's a pair, they're separated at birth, and one pair ends up in the country of Syracuse, and one pair ends up in the country of Ephesus. And late on in the play, there's this abbess played by Annalise who's been sitting in the audience during the entire show, and then at the end she emerges and like joins the action, and we soon find out that she is the mom of the twins, Emilia, and this is their dad, Leon. And Gio, the director, is specifically like referenced his character Emilia as like a seer of everything going on, and she's literally hanging out in the audience among the watchers. So, who exactly is she? Why is she casually hanging out with the watchers? And also, there's a scene where Antipholus is walks on reading the script for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, which again is something that the watchers did to Margaret and Ashley in the house. So, how the fuck is any of this possible? And also, when does this play take place? When it came to like the vision, like in terms of visual detail and sound, like it was all over the place, very anachronistic. And like Gio has really said several times, it's not really meant to be said in a certain time period. Like it's anachronistic. So that's great. Well, I can kind of just ignore our visual details. Whenever it was originally said, and we know Shakespeare is really well known for historical accuracy, so we can just fuck. No one can find a definitive answer because Shakespeare was even more loose with historical accuracy than he usually is. And there's like things that set it as being in ancient Greece, but it has to be before this year. But also there's Christianity, but it has to be this before Christianity because of this thing, and this city was renamed. And like, there is no accurate place I can place this. So we're just going to like a rough range of late BC to early CE. And that's where all the different interpretations I found kind of landed. Anyway, so Aegeon, the father of the twins, says he's from Syracuse, but he and Amelia also took a lot of trips to Ephesus, also known as Epidamus and Epidamnum, a lot of names, and I was reading the Wikipedia page because, you might find something interesting, and I did, because in late BC in Epidamnum, there was a pivotal battle between Julius Caesar the leader who he overthrew, and I also established this last year, I think I talked about it in the presentation, but like, I determined timeline-wise that Julius Caesar dethroned Pompey before he time traveled to the present. So we know that the Romans around this time, and also because of certain lines from Julius Caesar, like the conquest of Pompey happened not too long before Caesar time traveled. So we know that in the late BC, that Julius Caesar's forces are like around, or the house is like around ancient Rome, and we also know that Aegeon and Amelia are around ancient Rome, and when the Comedy of Errors happens, we find Amelia just chilling with the audience. So I think that Aegeon and Amelia like met the Watchers and possibly even traveled in the house, which is why Antipholus would have a fucking book about what happens to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and also this would just like explain. Oh, memes. This would also explain like how Aegeon and Amelia got connected to the Watchers in the first place. Water. Okay, so we talked a little bit extra about the house and about the Watchers and their role in things this year. Let's talk about our kind of third big thread from last year. Genu. Genu was a character introduced at the age of like 4 years old in Wolfplay, and again, long story short, he was like, we talked about him a lot last year. He like meets the Watchers at a very young age and becomes very like intertwined with them, and goes on to like work for them and serve them, but also is secretly sabotaging things they do. Again, this is all this recap. But yeah, he appears in many plays under like many names in many forms across so much of time because again, he works for the Watchers. And I think he has made a couple of appearances this year, but to talk about the first one, I think the first one in Carol of Drums is Genu, because in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, first of all, he went by the name of the player, and going by the name of the first player. Again, the first player is very between worlds, breaks the fourth wall more than anyone else, and last year Genu was often very much a point of connection between mortals and Watchers, and also takes on many different names and disguises, which the first player does in Hammer with Drums. So, and we briefly talked about like how the Watchers how like Arthur Emerson is involved with the Watchers and they have access to magical spells that can bring stories to life, which is how the first player was able to, as previously discussed, bring Hamlet to life because she's tied up with the Watchers. So that before I get to the online program, before I get to the last like really big connecting thread, I just kind of got some small little things, little references this year and just like updates to things last year. Okay, first of all, shout out, I made this list a couple hours ago. Christopher Blondes is everyone I know who is canon to the last year and this year. And then like Watchers once were like explicitly mentioned by name, and then the people who were like people in the universe are Oberlin, and a couple people for whom it's ambiguous, and then also stagehands. Last year I claimed that Molly Reiser was a Watcher because in Estrella, Oregon, there's a bit, she was stage crew during the show, and there's a bit where a character interacts with her. And also, because in Estrella, Oregon, the artist named the characters. One night, they named one of the characters Molly Reiser, and I was like, oh, she's like playing an active role in the show, and they name a character after her. She's probably a Watcher, but now that we know stagehands are like a thing who like work with the Watchers, I think she's a stagehand. So that's fun. Next little update. Ray from Ghost House, I think died in the same car crash. in an early morning car crash. Drunk guy decided to drive the wrong way. Last year in Freakfield, the main character, Danny Sanchez, was hit by a truck in 2022, and it was also taking place in the morning. Now, the details of Danny's, of Danny's, like, not murder, fucking death, accident, are a little bit different. There's like two truckers and one of them is having an asthma attack, and that's what like causes the crash. But Bray says there's a drunk guy, but here's the thing. He says some drunk guy decided to drive in the wrong lane, and when the truckers are like about to crash into Danny, we hear car horns going off, which means it wasn't just like a truck is going down the street and Danny stands in front of them. The car horns are going off, which means that something unsafe must be happening, which means the guy having an asthma attack could have very, very well swerved into the wrong lane, causing Ray to think he was a drunk guy driving in the wrong lane. So, yeah, this is a little update, but fun. I think these guys died in the same car crash, which is funny. Like, truck hit Danny, and there's also a collision that involving Ray's family's car. Also, a little update. Last week there was a show called A Doozy, which real-life student Danny took up. And his last name was never mentioned in the script, and I had a whole theory about him being Danny Sanchez, and then he so happened after the theory, and I went to see it, and in the second scene he said, "My name is Danny Chan Artiga," so little update, he's not Danny Sanchez. Anyway, next little update. Yes, in a Phil's house. Again, it's a little world-building update. Last year I said Hell and Heaven, as explicitly being Frank Theo, might have been like alternate names for the underworld that we saw on Utah. It's like, that's the afterlife. This seems to no longer be the case, I think, because in Ghost House, when Ray is at the gates of heaven, Earth is explicitly described as being down there, so like, if heaven were another name for Elysium, that would be in the underworld, it would be under the earth, but Earth is very explicitly described as down there. And also, this makes sense with the line the inventor had last year about those 6 feet under and those of the sky when he's talking about the dead. Like, there's a heaven, there's a hell, and then there's also the underworld. What decides which afterlife you go to? I don't fucking know. Maybe. I think I've heard Marvel Comics has this problem where they have like 20 different afterlives and like, I don't know, man. You go to one of them. Now, talking about Stranger Things, so just keeps coming back. In the middle of the show, Barbara starts dating the Demogorgon. This little throwaway line, a little fun 80s television, where she says that the Demogorgon is the king of the underworld, and she's his lady of the upside down. But as previously established, the underworld and the upside down are different places. So like, what the fuck does she mean by that? Well, last year we know that the inventor took over the house from Persephone, and I think maybe he helped him do that. He recruited upside down creatures, because then he was just going after the house. So like maybe he recruited upside down creatures and they took over the underworld, and then the Demogorgon just stayed ruling it, which is how he can be of the upside down, but also the king of the underworld. Because the inventor just used him to take over the underworld and then took the house and left. What slide is next? Is this the big one? Is this the next big one? It is the next big one. Last big connecting this is one I've been looking forward to talking about for a very long time, for much of the year. Okay, so last year, there were 2 shows for which I couldn't find any connections. Delaney Daniels and Daddy Longlegs. So good that those, well, we'll talk about Daddy Longlegs in a sec, but they both became relevant again this year. Last year, just so I could bring up Delaney Daniels, I was like, let's throw in a slide about sentient animals, because Delaney has a couple throwaway jokes about sentient cats. This slide literally just existed so I could bring up Delaney Daniels. It didn't really mean anything. Wow, there's like sentient animals, there's lobsters in the War of 1812 as seen in Phil, Oregon. That's cool, I guess. And then, something happened this year. I sat down with Xander and Chase to interview them about the pre-show bits during West Skeleton. And will they bring out this And they move around and tell people it's cursed. And they told me again in this interview that their characters were like scared of this cat for some reason. And also they mentioned that it's like on or above like the level that they are, as in it is something that threatens their power. But like, these guys work for the Watchers. What could they possibly fear unless it's something that is at the same level as the Watchers or above them, roughly. So, wait, fuck. Where am I? Okay, yes. So, last year, when I was talking about animal intelligence, the first notable signs were in the War of 1812, which the Trail to Oregon reveals to us, and it is confirmed as fact, that the War of 1812 was actually fought against literal lobsters. Like when they say lobster backs, like they were literally fighting talking lobsters from the ocean. And then I plan to talk about sentient animals in a couple of modern plays, and especially in Legally Blonde, there is a dog that psychically communicates with characters. And it's amazing things. There are 2 throwaway lines about sentient cats, and they're treated relatively normally, which is weird. We had lobsters in the War of 1812, but that was like kept secret, probably by the government. Like most of the characters in the play don't believe that there were lobsters, and then we find out that there were. But in the modern day, we start to see people becoming more comfortable with sentient animals. They're like slightly more well known. A notable trend in animals, and it starts in 1812. And what else was in 1812? 1812, so yeah, a big old celestial event, a really huge, a comet coming to Earth that is talked about a whole lot. An event that is apparently said to portend untold horrors at the end of the world. Now, so earlier in this presentation I said, oh, I think humans were just like aware of the Watchers, like just kind of in general. But like last year, when I claimed that the Watchers revealed themselves to humanity in 1833, because that was when Oberlin was founded, and like the father from Trail to Oregon has like he literally like meets the Watchers and he like questions who they are. Like it's literally said that he doesn't know who they are and he's meeting them for the first time. So like we have people meeting Watchers for the first time in 1833, but we've seen them interact with the Watchers a lot in the past. And As You Like It, in Comedy of Errors, in Antigone, and in the Great Comet of 1812. And what happens between the end of the Great Comet of 1812 and 1833? The arrival of the comet, a big celestial event happening in 1812, which is when the War of 1812 started. So we have a big old celestial event said to portend untold horrors and doom. And right at that time, sentient animals start to pop up. And also at that time, humanity suddenly becomes less aware of the Watchers, as if it's being overshadowed by something equally as powerful. What I am laying out is that I'm just naming the cat god. I couldn't come up with a better nickname. This cat deity, who is associated with intelligent animals, arrives in some way on Earth from another dimension or from space or outside the universe or wherever, sowing the seeds of animal sentience and temporarily, because it is as strong as the Watchers, overpowering their influence, making humanity no longer aware of the Watchers, until they create Oberlin in 1833. And that like maybe pushes the cat god's influence more to the shadows, but we still see sentient animals in the 1900s. Now, to talk a little bit, I can collection of gods and other creatures besides their own. Basically, these are like the big gods at the top, the Watchers and the cat god. And then we have Conrad and the devil and the stagehands, and we're like kind of at/below the level of the Watchers. Here we have mid-tier gods. The inventor and his wife, Miss Ermentrude, which was also the Wildlife Pantheon, they all seem to be on the side of the Watchers, because remember, father's son from the Wildlife Pantheon is the son of Conrad. We have the cat god, who doesn't have any mid-tier gods allied with them that I know about. And then there's the Greek gods, who are kind of doing their own thing, except Persephone is in opposition to the inventor. And we of course have Genu, who works with Watchers, the Watcher cult. And so last year we had the introduction of the alien vampires, the Transylvanians, as seen in Rocky Horror and Dracula. And I think they are connected to the cat god for a couple reasons. Number one, we literally are told and shown multiple times that Dracula and other vampires of its kind can transform into like wolves and bats and I think birds. And like they can transform into animals, which is already weird. And also, this was something I maybe mentioned earlier, but talked about last year, how like the Romans came to the late 2020s and took over the world, and then they got conquered by the Transylvanians. And on the eve of Caesar's death, is when the Transylvanians arrived, and again I explained that last year. But also seen around the Capitol when the night before Caesar's death, the night before like shortly before the Transylvanians arrive, there's a fucking lion walking around in the capital, as in a cat. Cats where they should be walking around on the same night where I previously established Transylvanians are arriving. And wait, oh, okay, I'll I guess I just put on the graph, but this is Julia from Fed with her friends who will also yeah. Whoa, where am I? Okay, yes. Okay. Now, finally, I know I was horribly out of context with Jackson earlier, but to talk in detail about him, I think that, again, Pierre is Ernest, is Jackson, and Pierre is a vampire, thus in service to the cat god. This is like mine where he talks about if you were free, which of course can mean many things, but when the comet is arriving, you know, the cat god arriving on Earth, he says that the comet brings no fear, like, it seems to stop just for him, as if he's aware that, like, the being that he is tied to, that he has allied himself with, is arriving, so he has no need to fear. So I think he's a vampire, like I said, also a changeling, like vampirized changeling, which I guess is a thing that could happen. But yeah, this is why he's immortal, how he could be Pierre and Ernest and Jackson. Now, in the points of being Ernest, it's explained at the end that Ernest was an orphan born to Ritual and Lady Brackle's sister, but how would that be possible if he was like already alive? How could he have been an orphan raised by her? What is his connection to Daddy Longlegs? Because in Jackson's dream love rotation, he also listed Daddy Longlegs. So to explain what that is, from a play last year, it's a private nickname is letters between early 1900s protagonist, an orphan named Jerusha, and her wealthy benefactor Jervis. Now, what if, going south, the orphan left in a bag that we were told was Ernest wasn't Ernest, but was Jerusha, as in Pierre, like wanting to get connections in a rich family, takes her place, sending her off to an orphanage in Manhattan while making sure she doesn't come back, like keeping tabs on her, including her mail, and that's why he later knows about the nickname of Daddy Longlegs. And I just got a screenshot where they're talking about what allegedly happened to Ernest and I think happened to Jerusha. One might point out that they said the baby was of the male sex, but we cannot rule out trans woman Jerusha. But then, if Jackson is Ernest, then why is he like hanging out pretending to be a teenager in the presents? Well, like I said, he name drops a bunch of artistic people at Oberlin, like a lot, as if he knows a lot of them, as if he's keeping tabs on them. It's like we said previously, the Watchers have access to like magic spells to bring fiction to life, and that's something that would give the Watchers power. And if the cat god is in opposition to the Watchers, it would want to try and impede their use of magic. I hope I did this right, but. So in The Pen and the Sword, we are told that the University of the Wilderness of Maine, which is where Arthur Amundsen teaches and does like magic to bring stories to life, the college is under constant attack from bears. And last year in Delaney Daniels, we were told that a very famous fiction writer was eaten by bears, which is not the yes.
It was the author of Captain Make-Believe.
The author of Captain Make-Believe. Yes, an English author eaten by bears, and then literally like the magical creative writing program being repeatedly targeted by bears. I don't think that's an accident. I think that is our resident sentient animal cat god. Now, I think Jackson / Pierre isn't the only one that's bound to this god. Finally time to talk about Fefu and her friend. So, there's a character named Julia who has a really weird thing where on two separate occasions, one that's described as being before the play and one that happens during the play, she's near an animal that is shot, and then like she gets a wound, like a bullet hole or whatever, and it's really mysterious and nobody really knows how it appeared, as if she is linked like spiritually in some way to the animals around her, which would make sense if she, like Pierre, had sold her soul to the cat god or whatever. Now, there's the characters talk about how at some point when she was delirious, she talked about like when she was under some unknown people torturing her and trying her, and how that shock was her execution, and like being persecuted by some weird unknown group. And then later we get a little bit more detail when she's like lying alone, having just kind of like a hallucination of sorts, and she's like addressing a mysterious male figure. And if you read on my initial read this monologue, like I read it and I was like, oh, she's kind of just like, I was like, this isn't lore. She's kind of just talking about like misogyny, and this isn't her being fried by some supernatural force. It's kind of just about, again, misogyny. But who do we know who is a powerful supernatural force who would be in opposition to the cat god, who would also be canonically bigoted and misogynistic? The fucking inventor! Piece of shit, imperialist, colonialist, racist, sexist, misogynist. I think that when she's in a coma, he is the one who's speaking to her, and maybe also the watchers. That's who the mysterious people talking to her are, and also being intensely misogynistic towards her are. Because she has connections with the cat god, the inventors and the watchers are trying to put her down in some way. Okay. Little other things to talk about. Other things to talk about, there's a bunch of end of the world stuff around the year 2030. Just quickly recapping it. The experience machine happens, which leaves most of humanity plugged into a simulation permanently, and then that's how the ancient Romans were able to conquer Earth so easily. And then they get conquered by Transylvanians, and we kind of already talked about things like this. But after that, we talk about how the sun disappears in Yetis, and I think that the Transylvanians get rid of it because the Transylvanians, also being vampires, there's a couple lines they have in Rocky Horror. I can't believe I missed this last year, but there's a couple lines where they call their home planet transsexual in the galaxy of Transylvania, or is it? Yeah. Planet transsexual. They call it a moon-drenched planet in like a land of eternal night, which makes sense because they're vampires. They're from a planet where it's always night. So the inventor, who last year he establishes that he conquered the sun, he became the sun god. I think they overthrow him. They kill him. I don't have enough information to say, but they are vampires and they come from a planet where it's always night. So I think they overthrow the sun god, and that's why the sun goes out. And that's maybe also an explanation for why logically everything on Earth doesn't just perish, because you kill a sun god, and that is a manifestation of the sun, and do they linger in some way? I don't know, but. And then the birth of Father Sun is, as we said, a new sun god to replace the old one. Now, last little thread I want to talk about is Antigone. So there was a figure last year in Antigone known as the chorus leader, who I originally thought was Genu because they were kind of a bridge between the audience and the mortals. But I thought it was weird that they would call the chorus leader because that implies they're part of the chorus, not a mortal human working for them. They talk about trying to reform the chorus. And like that, I originally thought it was Genu, but then it didn't seem to work out. But who's someone who we know who is not on the same level as the audience, but also kind of is them, and also would be trying to reform them? Cadigan. The one who's been rebelling against them, the one who is warning the characters in stupid fucking words, the one who is exiled. I think in Antigone, they are the chorus leader, desperately trying to reform the Watchers. And actually, it works in a way. So a thing that the Antigone team did was they basically said that the audience is being fed lines, and they were if the audience rebels or goes against these lines, we stop the show. So during the Monday night performance, Antigone was about to be executed in the plot when the audience actually refused to say some of their lines, and they actually rebelled and they stopped the show. Antigone was not executed. These evil, cruel, omnipotent gods, for some reason, found enough kindness in their hearts to stop an innocent woman from being executed, which I think is neat. It shows they somehow have, despite all of this shit that they've been through and how evil we thought they were, they have the potential to change. And Cadian's efforts help them to change. And I think soon before or after this is when, sort of meta-theatrically, the answer is presented, because at the beginning, there's a scene where the director of the production, of course, Rylan right now, where the director talks to the audience and tells and says that they're going to tell them a story. So I think, again, either right before or after Antigone, because this is kind of a part of a redemption arc, I think that the answer is being presented to the Watchers as sort of reminder of what they went through so long ago, back when they were just one innocent person before everything they went through. And as we saw in Antigone, that good has remained in them all this time, and just rediscovering the story has helped them realize that despite all the pain they've caused, they can still change, despite their centuries literally being in a hellscape, despite the eternity of torment and suffering, and despite the godly ascension, despite everything, it's still you. project, you can read my very scattered and weird notes and my spreadsheets and just take a look around behind the scenes. I was originally gonna make like PDFs with like the timelines actually laid out neatly, but I didn't have time because I finished the slides 2 hours before this. But I just wanted to make those at some point and get back on Instagram. But yeah, thank you all so much. And also thank you to every person who I asked questions about a show they were working on, every director and playwright I sat down with for an interview. Just yeah, this is a very fun project, and I'm really happy to share it with you all. Also, go see Variations on a Love Theme tonight, tomorrow, and Tuesday, and I'll make sure tomorrow.